Welcome to Bloom, the place to be inspired to be the best version of yourself and make a positive impact for meaningful change in this world. Welcome to another episode where I'm introducing to you one of my oldest friends, actually. I've known Ian Graham for more than 30 years. We met in London a long, long time ago, and we never lost track of each other. Because our worlds connect in many, many, many ways. And Ian describes himself as having the second oldest profession in the world, namely being a channeler, meaning that he is able to communicate between the two worlds, which in the second oldest profession, there was always somebody in a tribe who had that job. It's just that in Western society, we think it is something unusual, but it is not. And I would like to talk with Ian about these two worlds, about the connection of the two worlds, because highly sensitives are especially designed to pick up signals, transport signals, and many highly sensitives are very much interested in that communication, but most of them don't actually know how to name it, how to place it, what to do with it. So we want to explore that today. And over to you, Ian. I'm sure you can introduce yourself far better.
Thank you so much. Who would have thought 30 years ago when we were going for walks and pushing your little daughter then in her wheelchair through the streets of London that we'd one day be doing something like this? So
No way.
it was written in the stars, obviously, that this was going to be our journey together, and it's been great fun.
It's been fun.
And thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I rather jokingly say I belong to the second oldest profession in the world. We all know what the oldest is supposed to be.
Yes.
But it is true that as long as humanity has existed, I think there's been somebody in the tribe whose role it has been to be the communicator between the two worlds. And it's called lots of different names. I think every indigenous group has their own name for it. It would be Sangoma, as in South Africa, or witch doctor, or shaman, or oracle. I think one of the most spectacular examples I've ever seen was a film of the state oracle of Tibet. And still today, the Tibetan government in exile is guided by the state oracle, the spirit of Nechung, who speaks through his medium. And it's quite a show because when this man goes into trance, and he's quite a little man, they put a headdress on him that is so heavy that his normal state of being, it would break his neck. But when he's in a trance, he wears this huge headdress. And it was he who predicted the fall of Tibet. It is he who gives advice. Maybe some of our governments now would be good to have the equivalent to
Indeed.
them. We will with the message in if they all had a channeler or a medium to direct and guide them. So yeah, it's a very, very old profession, a profession. People weren't paid for it. But anyway, nowadays, of course, in our society, well, if I was amongst indigenous people, I'd be the most respected person in the tribe. But in our society, in Western society, I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the kind of the weird guy and the one that arouses all kinds of skepticism and negative comments and so on. So the roles have changed a bit. But fortunately, I think more and more people are opening to what wisdom we can benefit from the unseen world. And because they have the overview, they are non-judgmental, they have a vision and wisdom which the human mind can't really comprehend. So I think that's, but I feel completely unprepared for it. I was the biggest skeptic you could ever meet. I always said I don't have a spiritual bone in my body.
That's true. I've heard you say that. I've
Yes, well,
heard you say
I
that.
really feel it. I really feel it. For me, giving me a job like this is like asking a Jewish rabbi to be a pork butcher. You know, it's so contrary to how I define myself. But it came out of the blue and I had to get on with it. But at the moment that it came, I knew deep down, yes, this is what I've come here to do. And
Yeah,
I'm
so
very
that is a very interesting. I mean, you said so many things that we could immediately start talking about.
sorry, I'm talking too much. You'll have to shut me up.
Well, no, I'm not going to shut you up at all. Quite the opposite. So I'm just that is a very, very important question. This, you're not having been somebody who was predestined to do that, that you had a lot of resistance, actually.
Absolutely.
That. And I also remember when the first time I came to you, I was scared to bits. I was like, the only reason why I went is because there was an American and First Nation name attached to it. So I said that needs to be safe, out of my own story. But anyway, so it's maybe just to make that point that this connection, even historically, even in tribal tradition, is not an easy one. Yeah, it is not one that comes without problems or trials. And yeah, please, could you go, for some people that are maybe skeptical who are listening to this podcast, to please explain how that happened, how you then said, okay, this is what I came for and I accept that job.
Yeah. Well, it happened 40 years ago, and I channeled this intelligence called White Bull, and it came out of the blue. Like I said, it happened at a crisis time in my life when a lot of very important things do happen in one's life, when one is forced into a state of surrender. And I was in a very challenging period. I was having a broken heart again. And somebody said to me, well, why don't you learn to meditate? Maybe you'll find some comfort in that. And so I was living in London, and I found myself at a place called the House of Spirit. Now, for a good Church of Scotland boy, this is not the place you'd expect to find somebody like me. But I went, but I didn't stay very long because people were talking about past lives and entity possessions and channeling, and this was just a bit too much for me. So I left, and I started meditating by myself at home. Then I started to get this voice in my head, and that alarmed me a little bit. As somebody once said, when you talk to God, it's called praying, but when God talks to you, you're probably psychotic. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going mad. This is I should go and see a psychiatrist or something. And I heard the name White Bull. And I think my first record when I was 7 was a song called A Little White Bull by a singer called Tommy Steele. I thought, oh, this is just some childhood memory coming up. Then I met somebody and he said, oh, he said, Ian, the wife of a colleague of mine has just started channeling this Indian and it's amazing. And I said, oh, Bill, come on, get away. This is dangerous stuff, hocus pocus. It can't happen. It's not possible. Not possible. But no, it's really good. It's really good. You should have a try one day. I said, no, it's not for me. But about 6 months later, finally, I agreed to meet this Indian who we called Teacher, and to see whether he could help me with my broken heart. And he couldn't. I wasn't very impressed with what he said. But for some reason, 6 months later, I had another meeting. And this time he said, I want you to join my group. Well, I had no idea what that meant. But I'm a good boy. I do what I'm told. And I went along to this home in Hammersmith, where there was a group of 6 people. They'd been sitting together for about 18 months. And the first thing I did was to meditate. I was the new boy. Sorry, there's a noise coming from outside.
Sorry.
I was the new boy. And as soon as I closed my eyes for this meditation, I found myself in an Indian camp. As clear as I'm looking at you or my room around me. And then the channeler, who was channeling Teacher, the entity began to speak and began to describe to me all the things I was seeing in my meditation as if he was standing beside me. And it was very basic stuff like, oh, that's my teepee, those are my horses, those are the hills where we go hunting. And then I saw this big Indian standing under a tree. He said, oh, with his horses, oh, that one over there, that's my friend Weibel, and he's going to work with you. Well, I was pretty blown away by that. That was a new experience for me. The next time we were meditating, I suddenly had this feeling of my hands getting very big and my face was changing. I was getting high cheekbones like Indians often see in the paintings. And my body was filling out as well. I was getting a very big body. And this was, I was still smoking in those days. So this is 40 years and 35 kilos ago. I've now become the size that I felt I was becoming. And then this voice came out and said, I'm Weibel, and I couldn't stop it. And at that moment, I knew deep down, this is what I've come to do. I hadn't found my path. I would do all kinds of jobs. I had a very expensive private education, which was supposed to lead to me becoming a lawyer or a doctor or something. And my first job actually was a lift operator in Harrods. Disappointment of the family, but it was my first job taking people to a higher level. So I suppose there's some significance in that. Although it's always been more important for me to bring people down to earth, bring them down to the ground. Um, anyway, and then it started. And I had no idea where it would lead. If somebody had said to me, "You'll be doing this for 40 years," I would have thought, "Oh, come on, that's not possible."
Well, lucky for us, you've been doing it for 40 years
Well,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
been a very important part of my journey, and I know a very important part of a lot of other people's journeys. I mean, you have, and that's something I wanted to also address. As far as I know, most of the people that actually come to you for advice are highly sensitive people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So do you think that's a coincidence? Or is it?
No, I think what if I'm not aware of things as they happen, so I don't know every individual story. But what I do know about a lot of them, that like me, they are people who have felt themselves outsiders in their family.
Hmm,
They have felt they were the black sheep of the family, that they were never seen or understood by others. And therefore, I think this is one of the challenges of being a highly sensitive person. If you're the only one in the family, it already lays the foundation of patterns to come of inner judgment, lack of self-esteem, finding it difficult to find a peer group in society. So I think that is definitely one thing that many of my clients have in common with each other, that they feel alien in their environment because there's nobody to really understand their sensitivity and how to handle a child with such sensitivity.
would you say that it also encompasses that sensitivity that I spoke about at the beginning, that many highly sensitive people actually have that capacity to cross the two worlds, maybe not in exactly the same way that you do, and that there is at least in my case, there was a yearning to try and not think that I was crazy in that
Yeah,
respect.
I
Yeah,
think so. I
that
think a lot of the high sensitive people that I know, they have an innate intuition, a gut feeling. And probably when they've tried to express it or reveal it at an earlier time, people say, "Oh, don't be stupid, don't be stupid." So they've sat on it, they've kept it blocked within them. And part of the work that White Bull does with them is to give them the confidence to trust that. And to use a contemporary expression going back to the pandemic, to come out of their personal lockdown and to
yes.
find out that this, especially at this time, this can be their greatest gift to the world, to actually expose themselves and to stand proudly in the world and share their vision and their feelings and intuition about life, about what's good in life, and empower people with this belief. So that they had, uh, I mean, it was very undeveloped in me when Mabel came into my life, but I had a kind of a higher vision of how things could be. And this is what I've
Really?
a lot of my clients, that they know it deep down, they know it. And so often they say, because, I know already everything that you're saying. I know it's true, but I never had access to it in my own conscious thinking.
Not
So
access, not confidence, no one to talk
no one
about
to talk to you. Yeah.
this without, because let's be clear on this. We are not talking about something woo-woo. We are
No,
not talking
not at all.
about,
Not at all.
disconnecting from practicality. We're talking about this deep sense of purpose that many highly sensitive have, this deep antennas for what's actually going on and for the processes that our societies are in,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that we are addressing that, and that ability to pick up all kinds of signals from the environment. And if we acknowledge that we are energetic beings, then it stops being woo woo. I
Yeah.
mean, let's be very clear about that in this podcast. There are things that are woo woo. There are things that are not
So there's a lot of
helpful.
woo, a lot of
There's
woo-woo.
a lot of woo woo, and to learn to distinguish that, what is that in deep intuition, what is that connection to the energy realm, and what is somebody who's trying to manipulate you, or disconnecting completely from practicality and the earth. So let's be very clear about this. And I know that was something I'm infinitely grateful for, grateful to you and to White Bull, because he sort of 30, my God, I was 32. He installed in me a very clear sense of what is woo-woo and what is not.
Yeah.
And he has never, I remember asking him the last time I talked to him, so, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And he said, well, that's up to you to know. Yeah. And I should have known, of course, but I tried. So I want to go back to this aspect of high sensitivity that can be so useful in this world. And I would like to sort of maybe tell a little story about that. And I'm sure you have some to share as well. And that is that I remember when I'd worked as a coach or a therapist for a few years, and I had, this voice that sometimes would sort of, I intuitively knew something about my client, but I would always stuff it down because it's not what I learned. And I said, that's just a part of me trying to interfere with being aware and perceptive. And I remember I was with a client and things just wouldn't progress. And I had this nagging voice in my, I have to say, left ear. And it said, ask her whether she drowned, or she almost drowned at some point. And I was like, yeah, right. But at the end, I was so frustrated that I asked her that question, and she looked at me and she said, how do you know? I had completely forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
I almost drowned when I was 2 years old because my mom lost hold of me in the bathtub and I went under. And that was the trauma that she had no access to.
Yeah.
And that taught me, and I've been using that since, to listen to that voice. I have no idea what that comes from. But whether it's my own intuition or a connection to another source or a connection to her, it doesn't matter. But I've learned to trust that there is more information available in any given moment than what my scientifically trained brain thinks there is.
Yeah. And people have this conflict often themselves because they've developed their rational brain as a way of surviving as a high sensitive person in a rational world. And then suddenly this intuitive side breaks out. And they think, well, how am I going to go forward with this? And I see, well, even now I can think of several people I know who are at a point where they're having to completely let go of their life as it has been so far, which has been ruled by the rational, because they've had to survive, they've had to get a job, follow a well-trodden path. But you can only do it for so long, and it has to come out at some point, or it'll end up destroying you if you don't bring it out. And so, yeah, uh, it's there. It's always there, as Weibel always says. If only you could quieten your mind, you would always hear that still small voice that's within you that speaks to you non-stop, guiding you, giving the right information. But we're not trained to be quiet and to listen, to hear that inner voice. And it's more easily available to the highly sensitive person. I think everybody has it really, but maybe they don't need it. But a highly intuitive person, highly sensitive person, I think the greatest thing one can do is to really just be quiet sometimes, quieten the mind and listen. Listen to that still small voice within, like you had the still small voice in your left ear saying, ask her if she's ever drowned.
Yeah.
That information is there, especially I think for the highly sensitive person. And maybe that's also what a role we can play in life is we have a greater access to that still small voice within. For whatever reason, maybe it's karma, maybe it's past lives, maybe it's just the nature of our soul that we have that ability. And the challenge now is to really use it because it is so needed now. So many people are lost and confused. I hear so often from people saying, Ian, I'm lost. I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am anymore. As they're going through their changes, as the highly sensitive person in them is beginning to emerge. And so yeah, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but
No. I think it's wonderful. So, we're already in one of the questions I wanted to ask, and that is, the contribution we like I always say, that we are the missing link, that we are the ones that have a job to do
Yeah.
in this, let's call it a transformation. You know, I'm not, you can, you know, put other words for this. I just happen to call it a transformation, deep transformation that we're in. And this disorientation that many people experience cannot be resolved by sticking to linearity. I keep saying and repeating that our world is dynamic, complex system, and that needs another approach if we want to solve problems that we have.
Yeah.
And it needs that awareness of other ways of receiving information other than the left brain categories and linearity. And I think highly sensitives are especially wired to do that job.
Yes. And I think if you look at all maybe the great inventors, the great artists, the great composers, creative people, they've always, I think genius is a good pointer to that, the highly sensitive, that they're able to, I mean, Weibel says genius is perfect channeling, perfect connecting to outside of oneself. A deeper sensitivity allows one to do that. So I think, yes, if we could all access, it's a big word, the genius in us, or that ability to, this is what the world needs. The world is so enriched by genius so far, and that's connecting to a higher power. And therefore, yes, because the rational mind can't solve the problems of the day. It's only inspiration and somebody who's willing to stand out and be different and yeah, tear up the rule book, so to speak, and offer a new way. And that's what we can do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bring the rebel out in us.
being the rebel, exactly. Yeah, all the greatest teachers have been rebels. All the most important people who've affected life on earth have been rebels. Jesus was a big example of that.
Yeah, and there's a deep fear attached to that. That again, you know, one may believe in past lives or not, but it's an interesting hypothesis to sort of say, well, maybe in other lives, when we were the rebel, it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, we were.
Another way to describe it would be with epigenetics and say, especially for women, you know, in our ancestry, we have a long line of don't go into the rebel, don't
Empowerment.
you know, that is dangerous in terms of, you know, you might be burned at the stake.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate that? You have are these different times now? What would you say?
There are different times. There are different times. What I want to say also in response to what you just mentioned, until Weibel came into my life, I was a good boy. You know, I followed the family. Well, I didn't become a lawyer or a doctor, but I was brought up always to be, so what will people think? What will people think? You know, to be polite and to satisfy my mother's narcissism in a way that she can be proud of me because I'm a good boy. But then when Weibel came into my life, that changed everything. I was no longer the good boy. I was the black sheep. I became the rebel. But the rebel was actually the real me. And so the great help for me in that was I was able to be my authentic self, even though it paid the price of being, you know, misunderstood by the family, a lot of friends left. And that is a price one has to pay sometimes to be the authentic self, the highly sensitive, authentic self. But that was the big gift that Weibel gave me, was that I could not anymore be the good boy as a protection against being rejected and creating disapproval. And so
Yes.
people are very concerned about that because they survive by being good, by being the good child or the obedient child.
Yeah, or
But
the obedient co-worker or
obedient
functioning
co-worker, exactly.
in a system that actually doesn't suit them in order to be finally accepted and loved.
Exactly.
And that price is probably a lot higher in terms of what it does to your body and your heart and your soul
Absolutely.
than to be the rebel. But again, I have to say, I think, and it's probably not just for women, I think also men who were like that, were severely punished in societies, in Western societies. So, with all the religious, I've forgotten the English word for that, but that, fundamentalism that existed. But I would like to stress in a way that my feeling is that is changing, that fear can begin to go, that that appreciation for sensitivity, the appreciation for people that are capable of communicating between the two worlds, that are able to co-create with others, that are able to step into other people's shoes more easily because they're so empathic, are beginning to come together, and they're beginning to make, like I say, a positive impact without being hindered all the time. What is your feeling about that?
Well, if I use my own example, as a gay man, growing up in Scotland, homosexuality was completely illegal. Not even in private, it was completely illegal. And being aware of that even within my family, and the judgments I knew would be there and in my environment. So in a way, talking about women being disempowered, gay people are being disempowered. And now, thank God, things have changed. I'm a sort of placard carrying gay at all. It's irrelevant to me in a sense now. I can be accepted much more. There's a much more accepting society now. There are still pockets of resistance and judgment and so on. But it's a much more accepting society, I feel. The generation younger than us, that they are so much more open to things. And I'm always so happy when, for example, people in their 20s and even teenagers come and talk to white ball, and they're completely cool with it,
Yes, isn't it? I find that same thing that, I have now a wonderful group of women, and they're all in their early 30s or mid 30s. And I feel such a sense of relief because I talk to them from my heart, and they, with all these things, and they will say, yeah, of course, that's the way it is. And even younger people as well. And it's like, my God, I've waited so long to find that tribe where I don't need to translate
Exactly.
what
My
I
closest
actually came
friends,
with.
my closest friends are all much younger than me because I don't have to explain anything to them, and they just accept it, and they're born with it. They're born with it. They're born with this awareness and consciousness, and therefore I think there's great hope for the world, even at a time like this.
Yeah, especially in a time like this, because now that through the internet and and everything else, it's much easier to connect to your tribe, and even and through the generations. That creates a huge momentum.
Yeah, it does. It's collective and it's building up, yeah. So I think that it's also a generation or this time now where women are taking back the power. In a sense that they are no longer faced with um, projections of being weaker or less or being dangerous or whatever. And it's a wonderful evolution, a marvelous evolution. And I do believe that woman is here to save the world. But I also include the feminine within men as well, the feminine principle.
Yes, we need to get a balance between the two.
Balance. Yeah.
I'm very much against these feminists that say now it's our turn because
No,
it's the same crap the other way around. So the same goes for high sensitivity. I keep saying also in these talks, in these discussions, that we don't need another silo. We don't need this, oh, we are the better ones. No.
no.
Everybody is needed according to their talents. We just need to learn to talk to each other and
Exactly.
work together.
Yeah. But also talking to each other requires that sensitivity, that awareness, that openness. People who rule by the mind are generally not open to talk and communicate authentically. They're stuck in their mindsets. So this is where the sensitivity is so useful as a way of being open to communicate and to be without judgment, and because we all know what it's like to be judged as being highly sensitive. So I think probably highly sensitive people are the least judgmental people you could find because we know the price to pay.
The price to pay. Absolutely. So I would like very briefly, because we have talked about ancestry a bit here. Your ancestry is very interesting. And in a way, I remember talking to you and you said that your grandfather had a huge influence on you and
Yeah,
possibly on the turn that your life took when White Bull came into,
yeah,
um, into your world. Maybe also as a story to show the serendipity and the connection that exists between generations and our own life path.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Well, sadly, I never met my grandfather because he died in 1942. Amazingly, he was born when Lincoln was still president of the United States.
Mhm.
I'm the product of a second marriage, so my father was 65 when I was born. Hence, there's a strange generational thing with my. I was the youngest of the grandchildren, but he was a missionary in India on the borders of Bhutan and Tibet, and his name was John, and he was in fact known in India in his circle as the modern apostle of love.
Mhm.
And he founded these children's homes, but more than that, he was such a remarkable personality. He was accepted by all religions. And at his funeral, even Buddhist monks led the procession. You know, he was universal, and he was a man of enormous love and personality. And so I grew up uh, with this name, but it also had a downside of it because in the circles I was moving then, if I'd go to a party, I'd be introduced, oh, this is Dr. Graham's grandson. You know,
Mm.
it became
Mhm.
a label, and for a long time was the main identity I had was being my grandfather's grandson because I didn't have any other identity. I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't playing rugby for Scotland, which was another one of the family ambitions for me. I was a lift operator in Harrods, or I was working in a shop. So I clung to this identity of being Dr. Graham's grandson, which changed when Michael came into my life. But um, I know he's very much with me and celebrates um, what I'm doing. But also, I mean, in my family, the Graham side of the family, service is the big thing. Um, and so, in a way, I've inherited the service gene, and it's always been there. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was doing social work. I was the youngest ever volunteer for the London Samaritans in my early 20s. So it's just there. It's nothing unusual for me. I don't understand the word service. I mean, what's so strange about service? It's just what we're here to do. Um, and so that also influenced me a lot. And so when I found myself in this other life of service, it was a natural evolution in some respects, as much as it put me outside the general acceptance of society. And my grandfather was also a rebel because one of the last things he wrote was um, a pamphlet called Stray Thoughts on the Possibility of a Universal Religion and How It Could Be Taught in Schools. And all his fellow churchmen were horrified at this. I mean, he really put a lot of condemnation and criticism for this. But what a wonderful subject.
Contribution. Yeah.
And
What a wonderful
contribution. Yeah, yeah,
contribution.
yeah. And I still feel it's part of my life's work, however long I live, to do something with that. A universal religion. And well, love is a universal religion in a way. So if one's living with love, one is playing a part in that. Uh, but no, he's been a great influence in my life. And he's opened doorways also for me to obviously travel a lot to Kalimpong, the town where he lived, but through his connections with other countries, I'm a welcome visitor in Bhutan and Nepal, and I've been marinating in it all my life. You know, you can't see it in this room, I think, but my home is full of
Yes,
objects.
I know. Yeah. So here again, we have this field that is connected in a very complex way that actually shapes who we are, who we
Yeah,
become,
yeah,
what our mission is, what we want to, what kind of meaningful impact we want to have on the world. And it's not always easy to find your way, through that.
no,
Maybe
no.
that is sort of our life path, but what
I don't
we
know what
really
would happen to me without that example of my grandfather. I mean, it's um, I could never be like him. I noticed the last time I was in India, somebody had made a sculpture of him, a bust of him. And I saw that, I thought, that's where my nose comes from. I've got exactly the same shaped nose as my grandfather. So
See?
but maybe I've inherited something else. I don't know. But it's
Oh,
just,
I'm sure you have.
it's something in the DNA. And my act of service is rather different from his. His was conventional. But yeah, I think we do carry this. And I see it in other members of my family too, although rather differently manifested. Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I would like to bring the discussion back a little bit to what I'm not sure advice is the right word, but coming from the work that you do and the many people you've seen and the clients you've seen, the changes you've seen, the many of the reflections you've had yourself, what is sort of something you could bring to our listeners to encourage them to follow that impulse or that connection to some of us are very connected with plants, others are very connected with animals, others like me can read people really really well, like I read the bodies of people and I never knew that that was a special skill.
Mm.
To sort of encourage and support and maybe inspire our listeners to trust that. Is there something you could sort of
Well, I think when it comes from the teachings of Bible, it's to ask yourself every day, what is my soul hungry for? What nourishes you? What inspires you? What does the sacred mean to you? Maybe the sacred is cuddling up with a pet rabbit or walking in nature. I think nature is a very important thing.
Mm,
Um, to be in that example of creation, which is in such perfect harmony. I think if people would really realize so many people are hungry in their souls, they don't maybe call it that, but the soul is hungry to be nourished. And when you really feed your inner life, the mind becomes quiet. An overactive mind can be a symptom of a hungry soul.
mm,
And you have that quietness within. And to create space, space is such an important, where a lot of people lack space, they long for space. And they're either in relationships or jobs or whatever, where there's just not space. So I'd say create space for yourself. Take
so
time for yourself.
so space, let's define space here. If I understand you correctly, space is not a place of nothing. It's a place, and it doesn't mean sort of resting and watching Netflix. It actually means doing something that um, feeds yourself in a way. Like for me, you can see the piano in the back, it's music. But for the longest time, I would do music in a competitive way. It was in a way of, I need to perfect this. I need to be, an absolute standard, and actually ruined my connection with it.
Yeah,
And I've learned to just sit there and sometimes just wait and actually start to listen with my inside ear to the melody and everything else. And then begin, if you want to, the act of playing the piano, but from a very different place. And then when I get up, I feel nourished, I feel
well,
complete, I feel
the problem
calm.
is when you're playing the piano, you're drawn into the now. Your mind is not wandering off on other things. And I think even watching a wonderful film on Netflix can have a healing effect if it really draws you into the present moment that you're not thinking about other things. So to be present with what you're doing, I think is in itself entering into a healthy space. And it could be a hobby, it could be anything that allows you to have a deep sense of what a relief. Yeah, I think this is a physical response to a healthy space to be is that you're naturally going to take a deep and take a breath. Relief, quiet, solitude. I
and
think,
that and that immediately connects you to that atmosphere, that other space, that place where you can actually receive information, if
yes,
it's,
yes,
yeah, that
yeah,
is useful to you, rather than going and hunting for it. It's just sort
exactly.
of preparing the ground,
Yeah,
trusting that ground, allowing yourself to be nourished by whatever is good for you, and then um, almost not even wanting for something to come, but then it will come on its own. Whatever information you need will be there.
Exactly. I mean, a good example of that is, well, my life's mainly occupied by doing individual sessions. People come and talk to a whiteboard, and I'm really longing to finish another book. People say, "Why aren't you writing?" I say, "Well, it's a strange thing, but actually, when I'm doing my work as a channeler with people, it's a completely other modus operandi than actually writing.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's only when I take time out. I mean, I'm hoping one day I can have a sabbatical. Then the inspiration comes to do the writing. And then Weibull can communicate through me because I'm not having to think, oh, I've got to be ready by this time for this next client or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So exactly taking the space allows the inspiration, the connections to come from within. And this is why I think, solitude is not aloneness, but solitude is such an important thing for people. And this is
Maybe
a
that.
lot of relationships are evolving as well, because more and more people are thinking, gosh, I'm so trapped in this relationship, I don't have space for myself.
Hmm.
And there's an evolution taking place in relationships because of this need people are finding to be in their own space.
Yeah, to be connected to themselves, to
Yes,
and
yes,
especially I think that that maybe is one reason why so many highly sensitives are introverts,
yes, yes,
because it helps us,
yes.
to
They go within, they're quite within because it's their space, their inviolable space. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah. And I think the ones that are extroverts, they sort of are maybe more required to go out with their
Yeah,
mission
yeah.
and to bring specific things into the world where you actually need that aspect.
Yes. To be a performer, to be a singer, to be an opera singer, to be a pianist, to be a whatever. Yeah,
Just be a public speaker, an entrepreneur, a change maker.
exactly. You've got to have the confidence, the extrovert nature to be out there. Sometimes, some of the time, sometimes people then can go back into their shell. But I think that yes, what is the soul hungry for? What is the diet your soul needs? Every soul needs has a different diet. What is
Mm,
your
I
need
like
to know
that.
yourself? Yeah. We
I
don't
love
eat the
that.
same food every day, so why should we feed our souls the same food every day?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Exactly.
Variety. I think variety is good, and the courage also to say no when life demands things from us that we're not ready for.
Mm, yes, that would be a completely, there would be another talk we could have because
Yes.
I mean, our time is almost over, and there's always
But
a
I think that the
question.
Bible often says the best friend you can make in your whole life is a word called no. Make that your best friend. It'll always be there for you. It'll always look after you. But the highly sensitive person is frightened of saying no because of the old patterns of, oh gosh, will they be unhappy? Will they not like me? Does this make me wrong when I say no to somebody? Yeah.
Yes, or am I making a mistake?
I'm making a
Or
mistake. Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that. So maybe we'll find another time to explore this.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
Or
But
you can use it. My last question is always, what did we not talk about that you, or what did I not ask that you would think would be very important for the listeners to know? Um,
well, yeah, if I look over the last 40 years, um, the biggest change I notice amongst my clients and the people who come, when I first started, probably 95% of my clients were women. Now it's 50-50 men and women, but I think sometimes even more men than women are coming.
Very interesting.
This is wonderful. And men who are making such enormous changes in their lives, they're really taking back the power. They're shedding this pressure of what a man's role has to be. And I think this is also a very positive step that men are taking to actually say, okay, I'm not going to be, you know, sacrificing my life to be just the breadwinner and to be in business and burn out. Um, I
Yeah,
think
and to lead from a place that is not connected to their
exactly,
heart. So if
exactly.
we say that, there's research says that there's basically the same amount of men and women that are highly sensitive. What
Yeah,
you're saying is that things are coming into balance.
yeah, yeah,
Men
yeah.
are also connecting to that inner space with more courage to say, well, I don't need to be the alpha male in the
No,
same way that it used to be. I can be an alpha leader, but in a different way.
The real meaning of an alpha male is one who cares. I've been watching some films of gorillas, and the silverback gorilla is the alpha male. He's so tender with his children. He's so protective of his family. He leads from that tenderness and that kindness. And I mean, I used to have women saying to me, "Oh God, my husband, I can't tell him I'm here. He thinks it's all stuff, and he just wants me to go out and get to work, and I want to do my stuff." Now, women come and say, "Oh, my husband, he's in his room meditating all the time, and I'm going to get him back to work." Complete change.
So
And
thank you for pointing that out. I think that is a very a very hopeful change, for what we talked about, how we can better communicate, how we can sort of be a more functional tribe on this planet.
and I think also, one final thing, I think that's because what is going to bring forth the leaders that we need.
Yes.
The alpha male, as the old meaning, is not going to be a good leader. You want a leader who knows about real servant leadership, and who leads from their heart, from presence, from wisdom. And as men, especially go through this transformation, a wonderful new generation of leaders is going to emerge, which you can't train somebody to be. It has to emerge from the nature of their soul.
Yes, I think that sentence is a wonderful sentence to wrap that up, because this is so much of what I want to bring into the world with this podcast, to inspire that new leadership, and to make hope and support those that feel that they're drawn to it, but that they can not comply with the old version of leadership and are disorientated that way. So thank you very much for that, Ian. That is a wonderful closing remark. And yeah, let's see if we continue this conversation another time with many of the topics we left unsaid.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Yole, for inviting me and for giving me this platform to share something of my life and my views with it, and my experience of many years of meeting many thousands of people.
Definitely. And, I'm very, very thankful for life, to, that it brought you into my life by complete serendipity. And
The feeling is, yeah. And serendipity is always out there. It's not some remote, rare event. If we can be open to it, we can all be touched by grace. We can all have that serendipity.
yes, very good. So thank you very much, Ian.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye, Yoli. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.